join the Rock and Roll Express, try to get even with us. It was Rage in the Cage. The rules were, and the reason why we did this is why these were the rules. There were 5 sets of handcuffs on each side of the cage. They were police issue handcuffs. I bought them myself. Still have a few. The winning team was the one who handcuffed each member of the opposing team to their side of the cage. And then obviously the heels, myself, are saying, imagine when we get these guys handcuffed and they can't get loose, what we might do to them, blah, blah, blah. And Bullet Bob Armstrong is the referee, the commissioner of Smoky Mountain, the only person that can keep order in this situation. The rest of the card was literally 5 singles matches between the guys that were in the cage match, because I only had, counting the managers, 15 guys on the card. But whichever team won 3 out of 5 of the status matches then had the advantage, because we entered like the War Games. So instead of the coin flip, I got the undercard out of it. And then basically 2 guys start, boom, 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 and then every few minutes, then you have to handcuff everybody. So the main event was going to go on for a while, and people knew they were going to get their money's worth. And we ended up doing much better than April, which hit, a horrible bottom and did like $4,000. And that's back, of course, as we mentioned, when our tickets were ringside $8, general admission $6, kids under 12, $5. So we almost doubled the house with this. We did 1,085 paid, 46 comps for 1,131 people, and $7,338. Still not what you would want out of a big show in Knoxville, but we got something out of it. Because that was Stan's last appearance in Knoxville. We would close the chapter in John City the following weekend. And we also, that was Robert and Jimmy's last time in Knoxville. And the babyfaces triumphed by winning the match. But then Fuller and Golden showed their true colors by, when they got unlocked first, they threw us the keys. They threw me the keys to our handcuffs and left the other babyfaces trapped. And when Bullet Bob tried to save him, then we attacked Bob. We handcuffed him out to the cage. Beat him unmercifully. I think I hit him 35 times in the chest with the racket and the stomach. He did crack his sternum. He went to the hospital that night. He was going anyway, but he needed to. It was chaos with people trying to get the cage, whatever the fuck, because that was going to set up my summer. I'd waited a year, and now finally we were going to get Bullet Bob Armstrong back in the ring as more than a commissioner, but back as an active wrestler. That'd been the point of featuring him in Smoky Mountain Wrestling from the start, because I thought this is the way we can draw our first big house. So anyway, that was May 9th in Knoxville, and then, of course, May the 15th in Johnson City, we did the last tangle in Tennessee, where the loser of the fall would leave Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the Rock and Roll in the Bodies, and that did 942 paid and 90 comps for $6,309. City's still doing well. And of course, Stan lost the fall and had to leave, and people thought the Heavenly Bodies were done. But on Monday, May 17th in Harlan, Kentucky is when we brought out Jimmy Del Rey. And announced, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Tom Pritchard has a new partner. His cousin, the Gigolo, has come to town. But I knew I had to get the Rock and Roll away from the Bodies, because it had been done. And I had to get some different combinations going, because we'd about blown off Tracy and White Boy. As a matter of fact, the Harlan taping on May 17th is when Tony Atlas was scheduled to come in to be my new top heel.
Oh, that's right.
And he was going to face Brian Lee on television and do a whole big angle. And I got the plane ticket back that morning with the note that he decided not to. So anyway, so now I'm still trying to figure out some shit to do. But anyway, we did one other thing that was important that night in Harlan. We shot a promo, because since Tom, they did the vertical suplex spot over the top rope. I mentioned this. Somebody did it 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, well, they did it safely. This one may have been even better, and Cody took the worst of the bump. He landed hard. Cody had something to prove here, and he was proving it. Seth started the heat when Cody came off the top. Seth drop kicked him in the ribs, and then, yeah, welcome back to the big leagues, bitch. And I'm sure a bunch of the trampoline cowboys over on the other side of the fence, because you're a good son of a bitch. How dare you say that? A little heat. Cody came back, clothesline over the top, a dive, and he hit Seth, and Seth took a backflip over the announce desk. One bobble. Cody did that turnaround crossbody off the top, and he was headed downwards. Almost missed him, but he saved it. They both saved it. And then he came off the stairs for a Hurricane Rana, and Seth almost lost him, but he caught him, and he saved it, and buckle bombed him into the rail.
Aloy.
And it was a great match. They had more heat and more comeback, false finishes, and finally Cody, the big comeback, the end crossroads, 2 count, big pot.
Right.
And they go to they've always got to go to the buckle. Everybody's got to go to the buckle. It's been a while there, but Seth ended up giving Cody an inverted or upside down.
Let me know what I can do.
Those of you
Good night.
who understand inverted, I don't understand why you go for this move. Superplex, which it looks and is even more dangerous than a regular superplex, but it looked beautiful. But then they didn't let it register because it pops right back up into that Falcon Arrow bullshit. Have I mentioned that that's one of my pet peeves? I've told you about Vince's. One of mine is a superplex off the top rope where both guys immediately come right back up and do
I was
another
back in
fucking
Barrel
smaller
checking up on the
superplex.
Vanguard when my focus picked up on another one of these.
But nevertheless,
I thought it was strange, so I decided to have a
they
little
couldn't get
chat.
the double bridge in at that
Saw
point.
me
They
coming,
would
he
get to
ran.
the match, but then Cody
Caught up
hit
with him and he tried to crush his
Cody
focus.
cutter
But there was still
off the
data.
top rope, and that was a
Bunch
pretty
of
thing.
location
I mean, they were right on
One
with
of
most
those called
everything.
first
Boom,
warrant.
2 count.
Know what it meant?
Then Rollins hits pedigree 2 count. Big pop on that one, because they thought that might be it.
Did any of that
And they did a nice
Sarah?
1-2 exchange with some body English and language to it.
You remember
Seth
how
went to the ribs, and then
the freebooters
he did
that
those
retaliated
face
against
kicks
the
where he
card
grabs the guy, what do they call them, Kawada kicks?
First female ticker in the
Is that
clan
from,
during her own
yeah,
foliage.
From Toshiaki.
That's when his family got killed in the Red Race.
Well, I bet you he was stiff too, but these didn't look too.
I thought she was dead.
Cody at the end of the
Taken out by
goddamn
one of the
match, he had
Rods.
fucking not only just welts on his face, but it looked like footprints on his forehead. So they were
No, hold
They're
on,
going in here.
Aloy. I'm coming with you.
Cody hit the crossroads.
Sarah's the last of the line
Then
of
a
killers
second-
that murdered Ursa.
Then
I
did
need
the
to be there when she
jab
goes down.
and the flip-flop fly bionic elbow to place went nuts. Nice little nostalgia business there. Hits the third crossroads. 1, 2, 3. Huge pop. This audience
I better get going.
You know where to find me.
are they loving Cody because it's Cody and the presentation? Or are they loving Cody because now they get to fucking crow about taking somebody away from the... Because all the AEW fans now and all the WWE fans are circling the wagons. One hates the other. They both say that the other company's matches are shit. Both of them usually are right. But now, is this going to be a deal where, unless they fuck up the booking some kind of way, or Cody brings back his entourage, Cody's already a made man, it's going to be over just because they get to lord one over the AEW folks? What do you think?
I don't think that will have too much to do with it, because I think such a small segment of the WWE audience is tribal like that. There's an element of it, of course.
Well, but everybody's
But it's a bigger element
tribal.
of the
It's
AEW.
WrestleMania, so these are the most tribalistic people. This ain't just Des Moines on a Friday.
These are the people that are flying to a place so they can pop nonstop. And the plan is for...
Boy, I know a couple of places like that. You don't need to fly to them. You just pay the hourly rate. You can pop nonstop.
The reaction to Cody was fantastic. It's all he could have hoped for, and they have him slotted to be a babyface on Raw, from what I hear. But when you get away from that traveling audience, that'll be the test. How do the fans... I think the question may be more, how do the fans in WWE take to him as a main eventer than it is, will they continue the booing? The only fans who would be doing that are fans who are watching AEW. So it'll be interesting to see how the crowd reacts after tonight, as we're recording, after Raw. If the fans tonight start booing him, and setting that precedent and the other fans see it, you don't know. If Vince sees that, you don't know. But Cody got off to a fantastic start. He came across like a star. Hey, let me put Seth Rollins over, because I hate his gimmick more than anything in the world.
Great match, though.
Great match. And when he stood there, and he didn't know who his opponent was, and he got serious for a second, and you looked at his face, and he was concerned, I believed in that guy. I kind of wanted to see what was going to happen. I don't need the fake Joker laugh all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the thing that I've liked about him since I met him in Ring of Honor. He can work his ass off, and for a guy that tall, he can do a lot of incredible things, and he'd have great matches, and then every time they have him speak or portray him in these fashions, it's counterproductive. But yes, Cody, back welted, face welted, beat up, but he got the ovation. He's over with the people. They're still in Dallas tonight for Raw. They're still with the WrestleMania audience and ambiance.
I hope they get it right.
And they're in Texas, and the Rhodes family in Texas. You're right, so I'm thinking it'll be a week or two until they go to a normal place in the United States of America. If there are any anymore, we're just a regular crowd of people come to see a wrestling match. Wait a minute, what am I saying now? Regular people don't even watch wrestling anymore. But we'll see what happens when it's not the most devoted of the devoted, and it's just a regular town and a regular WWE crowd, and we'll see, how they respond to it then.
And it's important to note the fans in AEW wanted to respond to him that way, and initially they did. He wasn't just some WWE guy. He was a guy that aligned himself with the Bucks and became part of their movement and got him there. And early on they did. The problem was when all of a sudden weird things and get into the programs or weird programs or promos that went nowhere.
The guy who got the Nora as Sarah's been looking for, that's him.
I have to think all of that's going to be out the window now.
Yeah, we don't know you.
The biggest disappointment of Cody in AEW on camera is the way he was used. Yeah, because it never made sense and it was disjointed. And at a minimum, the disjointedness should probably go away. This is on that show every week.
Well, plus the WWE machine, the producers, the people in various places will keep him from going out and sounding so grandiose and glorious about himself that he gets that kind of heat.
I was going to say, I saw an interview he did backstage after the match, and right after the match, they sent a girl up to him right away with a microphone. He's covered in sweat, blood, and whatever else. He looked like he was in a fight. It looked great.
Yeah.
And it was the best interview I've ever heard him do, and it wasn't in front of the fans, and it wasn't that kind of interview, but he sounded so real and so genuine. And I thought back to the last interview we heard.
Hey, Lloyd.
So what do you guys want to talk about? I didn't get the contract I wanted. Like,
They come to me now. Be a letter here.
and this is a chance to interview backstage. You see the guy go, what this guy? What the guy? So it'll be interesting to see how long he can ride this.
Dusty Rhodes, he could touch common average people. He could talk to them. They would get behind him. He looked like one of them. Even in some days when he was wearing the furry robes and psychedelic outfits and everything. It's all that Dusty, if it was the cowboy jeans or the psychedelic stuff in the 70s or whatever. At the root of it, Dusty Rhodes was a fucking redneck that came in the money. And everybody could identify with that. They liked him for it. And they got with him. And that's the way he came off. And he didn't, and like I said, there's a couple shows ago, 4 or 5 syllables. It was one that he had made up. And he meant, even though it wasn't a real word, but it's that, Cody is the rich grandson of a plumber. He's got an entourage in a reality TV show, and he's using real big words in their real context. And he got too big for his britches, as Michael Fournette used to say, in the fan size, I think, or two. It was like he was
dabbling in wrestling while he was a reality show star and an international celebrity and man of business. That took him out of the place that he had for so long in people's minds, which was this fucking guy that's done his own thing and he don't care, he's comfortable with himself, he's a big fat slob and he kicks ass and we love him. It wasn't the same. We shall see if they keep, in the WWE, if they keep Tony away from coming off like Richie Rich instead of grandson of a plumber.
Commemorate those times. Maybe you don't want to get some photography. Maybe you don't want to. I guess you really just photography. Maybe you just don't want to do that.
Maybe you don't want to sketch yourself. Maybe you don't want to, use your face to cut some gorilla graphics. Maybe you just want to learn painting. No, I would think that with all the pictures that the private photographers, the personal photographers have taken of Cody and Brandy and their extended family and entourage, that they've got plenty of photographs that they can send to the folks that Paint Your Life, and they will get a giant, hand-painted, custom-made portrait that they can hang on their wall and they can relive those memories forever when they were all together on the nightmare bus that Tony Khan got for them. What a great idea. If you've got a family member or a friend or even someone you don't care about, but you want to make them feel bad, get them something nice and they'll feel guilty. Whatever it is, birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, paintyourlife.com can take any photograph or combination of photographs, and their team of world-class artists will turn them into a custom-made, hand-painted portrait. You can get the picture in as little as 2 weeks. And they will work off of anything, yourself, your kids, family, special place, lost loved one, cherished pet, even an action shot. Whatever action you may be getting, we're not going to be the ones to judge. You send that picture, Paint Your Life, and after they make multiple copies to laugh at you in their warehouse.
They don't do that. Don't even say that. They do not do that.
They do not do that. You will not know a thing about them doing that. They will
No, they don't do that. You will not
do it. That's
over there.
Over there. You don't know anything about the thing they're not doing. And there's no risk on this. At PaintYourLife.com, if you don't get the final painting, your money is refunded here in and right now is a limited time offer. You can get 20% off your painting, 20% and free shipping. If you text the word DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, to 64,000, that's DRIVE, to 64000, 20% off. As a matter of fact, if you have all of your family members painted you get 25% off. No, if they don't have to go through all that detail,
there is no extended dignity discount. Don't tell people.
Well, that's different than the information I got. Wait a minute, maybe I'm thinking of another company.
I think so. I don't know what information you have. What information do you have?
You want a taste of
Well, I
this?
had information that says if you go in naked, you get in free. But that may have been a club rather than... There was a door charge if you were closed. But, and fortunately, I got 15% off because I had a handcuff key in my pocket. But anyway, it paid your bill. As I mentioned, there's no risk. Everything is done and safe. If you get your painting, you'll hang it on the wall and you'll hug it and squeeze it and call it George forever. Paint Your Life. Celebrate the moments that matter most. Messages generated by multiply. Available at paintyourlife.com/George. Keep those on, cowboy.
And Cody obviously was at WrestleMania in a bus, he had his family there and some other people there. And I believe I heard, I got to go back and check, that in the post-Mania media scrum, now they're doing it, he said that Vince actually gave him a bus as one of the things in the negotiation. And it made me laugh because if that's true, he wanted punk money from Tony but he wanted Punk Perks from Vince. Wasn't Punk the one who got a bus?
Blood bug.
Years ago?
I don't know. I didn't know that if Punk was a Bus fan or not.
I could be wrong.
Rock got a bus.
I could be wrong.
Rock got a plane.
Vince gave Rock a plane?
Rock got a plane.
Oh, that's on his own.
I'm just trying to match the stars of their conveyance and transportation. So Rock got a plane. Rock got a bus. What? What's a goddamn bus? I want a nice SUV. It's fun. You can park anywhere. You can go through the drive-thrus. I almost sleep on the goddamn thing. Anyway, but Cody must like buses.
I just wasn't understanding it.
That's another weird thing. Well, the whole idea of get away from your family.
As a family now,
Most of the guys that ran the business had a family they were anxious to get away from. For heaven's sake. It's nice he got a bus.
I guess so. Well,
And Luger got a bus. You see where that went?
Vince stays in love with Cody a little bit longer than Lex, but
So what, Lex was not allowed to actually take the bus anywhere he wanted to go. He had to get on the bus and drive the bus, or not drive the bus, ride on the bus all across the country.
bus.
Well, he might have stuck up there once or twice, but he had to ride all across the country to do those promotional appearances, and he was about as comfortable as a fucking man with his ass on fire in the depths of hell on that bus. The other day, because I should have done this in better order, because we just on a lark, just on a lark one time, we did what has come to be known as one of our deep dives, where I just went back in one of my books and studied this time period and gave a bunch of the details, right? Well, then we just kind of started hopping around with whatever was interesting. Well, now I had to ask you the other day, have we done March 94, because that was WrestleMania 10? And your response was, I can't remember. Apparently you don't pay attention. But then we narrowed down the fact that I don't believe we have, right? So I try not to, I try to prepare for these things, but also first glance on some of these things is entertaining. But I go back and make sure I've got all the records and the details and everything, and I can't understand how that I lived through this month with any type of sanity. And at this point, 24 years later, I know what was making headlines on a regular basis at this point, because I was a complete fucking idiot for doing all of this stuff.
Before we recorded,
I think I saw some doors.
I'm looking through this, and I have no idea how I'd have a breakdown. And I told you, I said, that is the exact same thing you said to me when you looked at your schedule from the summer of '92.
Yeah, and then I said, this is worse. this was really okay. We had gotten, on one of the last ones we've done, and by the way, you can go to the YouTube channel, folks, and you can catch up with all this stuff, because they are clearly headlined or delineated, like Jim Cornette talks about this time period, 93 or something or other, right? So they can prep for this, but we had talked not long ago about trying to get Knoxville and gone through the summer of 93 and the angle between me and Bob Armstrong, and then finally mentioned, of course, the August 93 K-Town Showdown lumberjack match with me and Bob that set the gate record we had done so far in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and finally established that people were going to come in Knoxville, right? We said that they were going to give us a chance. We got up off like 1,000 people.
Be careful.
And drew a big house there. Well, then we had a good holiday period of Thanksgiving and Christmas time, 93, with Thanksgiving Thunder and Christmas Chaos. And then, of course, as everybody, we've talked about a number of times, finally in February 1994, it worked out. The conditions were right. We hadn't had a show there since Christmas Day because they didn't have an advantageous open date in January. So we were out 6 weeks.
We were still on Sunday afternoons, but it was, during the wintertime football season, people were used to doing that in Knoxville in those days. And I was able to get the right talent and had just a great amount of not necessarily blow-off matches, but angle matches, and some of them were going to come to a conclusion. And that was Sunday, February 13th in Knoxville, Sunday Bloody Sunday. I went in, as I think I've told you, in the locker room, noon or probably 11 o'clock, because I think we were probably shooting local promos there too that day, and asked Sandy Scott what the advance was. And normally, whatever the advance was in those days, if it was $2,500, you knew you were going to do $7,500 to $10,000 for a gate, because you'd do 3 or 4 times, your for the final gate what your advance was. And he said, $8,000. I'm like, what the fuck? It was the biggest advance, one of the bigger houses we'd had at that point, right? Almost. And we ended up doing 3,605 paid people and 295 comps, so 3,900 people and $31,080 for this show, which smashed the previous record in Knoxville, as I mentioned, was me and Bob, was $18,000, so that was almost double. The seating chart for wrestling at those days to Coliseum was a little bit under 5,000 because they'd long since taken to using a curtain at the end to block it off, so we almost sold the thing out. And this was the card. And it was basically every match, as you'll see, it was like one of those Bill Watts Mid-South Wrestling. I just said, fuck it, let's see what we can do. This looks like it'll work. The Smoky Mountain title was on the line between the Dirty White Boy and Brian Lee in a Tennessee chain match. And this was when White Boy had switched babyface because Tammy, in the Aaron Fleming Groucho Marx takeoff angle, Tammy had started medicating Mr. Wright, and he was all confused, and she was keeping him away from the Dirty White Boy, and Brian Lee was being a big prick, and finally they, jumped White Boy and beat shit out of him, and that started the whole angle, and Ron Wright had been off now for about 6 months as a result of that, right? So finally,
this is also when Brian Lee started turning into The Undertaker.
Well, exactly, but more on that potentially later. But anyway, so in this one, Ron Wright was going to come back to corner the Dirty White Boy the first time for either one of them, or first time for Ron Wright, and one of the first times the Dirty White Boy was a babyface. They'd been working a few months. In the Tennessee chain match, Ron Wright's specialty, and he gifted Dirty White Boy his old Tennessee chain. So that was the attraction for the people in Knoxville to come see Ron Wright as a babyface. You wanted to be cheering for so fucking long now, right? And the title was on the line. And then the Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris, and the Moondogs in a cage match, because they had been working a program. My alternate team, the Moondogs against the Bruises had been my previous team, and we had turned on them when they got mouthy and worked a program with Heavenly Bodies. Anyway, Bruise Brothers, Moondogs in a cage. Then we had trained, and we've told this story before, Mike Furness, Doug Furness's younger brother.
I just saw a clip of Shawn Michaels versus Owen Hart from 1995. Also, I saw that you were at ringside with Owen. Do you know why Shawn passed? Did the coke and pills wear off? Was this a work? Because
hey, look, this draft here, it's got to be another pack.
I almost hate, there's some things that people still question, and I almost hate to pop the bubble of those people, but at this point, because we do have a reputation here for honesty, should I go ahead and spill the beans? Shawn had the concussion where he got beat up. That was when he got beat up by the Marine, right? And sodomized him. They penetrated his most gentle of innermost regions. No, anyway, it was known it was a
a fact that he had had a concussion and had brain, swelling and blah, 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 and all that stuff, right? And so on the show, they made mention of this fact that he'd been off for some time with that, and he was coming back from that, and blah, 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 and he, been cleared by, maybe he hadn't been cleared by the doctor, I don't know what the fuck. But anyway, they wanted to, really passed out, and so they, oh my gosh, and get talk about, did you see what happened to Sean on Raw, and we're all worried about Sean, and, etc. So everybody sat down, and we tried to figure out, and I can't remember step by step what led up to it now, and I'm hearing this question, for the first time, so it's not like I prepped, but basically, I think he had taken a few bumps, but he was coming back and doing something to Owen, and then suddenly he got woozy, and then he did that wobble-legged kind of drunk cell and dropped down sideways, and then me and Owen kind of go, what the fuck, and he rolls out, and we're on the floor, and you see me concerned, kind of looking at the referee like, well, hey, what would actually happen? And the announcers called it like they were seeing it for the first time, and so it was, because it wasn't overdone. They didn't come out, they didn't have a fucking ambulance drive right in within the next 13 seconds where the fucking stat team jumps out with the fucking paddles and clear, It was worked like a kind of holy shit, this is maybe not part of the fucking show. So it worked in that respect.
An interesting period of time because, of course, this is November 95. Nitro's been around for a couple months now, so it really is the beginning of the war for Monday nights. Was Watts still there in November? And also from what you remember, because, of course, this is November. This is right around the time that you stopped Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Did you get to spend much time around Watts when he was there, and what did he think of Shawn Michaels?
I don't remember. I sound like Lance now. I don't remember if he was still there or if he was out in like September or October. It was very close. It was close. And I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him because he was producing the show for Vince. That's one of the things, well, he ended up doing that. By the time he got finished was he said, hey, let me produce with the talent. Of course, Vince couldn't stay away from that. But one show he did, and Vince was like, I've never seen a show run so smooth, pal. But he couldn't stay away. But so I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. But yes, on anything that we did, especially that, I think it was probably September or October. They did that big angle to go off the end of the show where me and all my guys beat down all the top baby faces, and it was like an old Mid-South beat down where there was no save and it was chaos. And Bill wanted to close the show that way, and Vince rewrote the show into a spot and put that match on first, and then had us shooting interviews that talked about it all through the show, and just he saw it differently or whatever. And that's when Bill was like, okay, there's only room for one tight sports. But Watts loved Shawn Michaels as far as his ability and his in-ring ability. You have to remember also, Shawn and Marty Jannetty from the first time too that they knew territories were known for getting heat on themselves. But Shawn Michaels in early 1995 did not have the reputation for nearly the amount of politics and bullshit that the 1997 Shawn Michaels would have. So Watts loved him as a worker. I don't think he would have put up with a lot of the shit that, Vince could put up with. But, so he was more than happy to be treated now.
I'm waiting for you.
I was looking at past wrestling circumstances, and one thing that caught my eye was in December of 1997, nothing but the house show ended in Rock. The original card was changed, and showing terrible matches, including The Undertaker defeating The Rock in the main event was for Triple H to go against Ken Shamrock, or Shawn Michaels came in. Michaels got on the mic and got the crowd off the song. Someone threw, and I am not kidding when I say a piece of paper at Shawn. And Shawn left the building with Hunter and China, The crowd then started throwing chairs, cups, and other stuff in the ring. Cops were called, and they were tears gas getting the crowd to go away from the building and out of the arena. Jim, do you have any recollection of this riot? Also, when a riot had been a bad idea for the WWF in 1990.
Well, I do remember that because the day after it happened, well, I can't say the day after, but within a day or two, depending on what day of the week it was, we were over at Vince's while he's getting the phone calls. And the crowd was being rowdy. It was Little Rock, Arkansas at Barton Coliseum, right? It's a rowdy fucking crowd. And they actually had Danny Hodge there, as I recall, as a guest referee also. JR had set that up, the biggest wrestling star except for Bill Watts ever in the area. And actually probably bigger than Bill Watts in Little Rock, Hodge was. But anyway, and it was going to be another house show, but they were doing that Degeneration X bullshit at the time. I don't remember the Undertaker match being an issue, and if it was that short in a house show, it may have been because one of those guys were hurt. Right? So I don't want to put blame on them. That the people may not have liked it, but that was not them being pricks. The gist that I got of it from the reports that we heard from, I think I wasn't there, but Jack Lanson was one of the agents that was reporting to Vince. Of course, Sean asked me on the phone with him and all this other stuff. Was that they came out doing their Degeneration X bullshit, and it probably was a rowdy crowd in Little Rock, as they always were, and I bet somebody probably pulled Sean's hair on the way to the ring. But when they started throwing the cups and shit, he just took it upon himself, said, okay, fucking drink, it'll be no fucking match, and fucking left. But I think Hodge was still standing there. It was going to be Helmsley and Sean against somebody in a tag. I think Shamrock and somebody. I don't know. The point is, and they do leave and they don't come back. And fucking, goddamn, it's bored. Shawn Michaels taking a bad situation, and instead of trying to do something to get out of it, I mean, we worked, Midnight Express Rock and Roll and I worked one night in Boone, North Carolina at a college gym where they were throwing tennis balls at the ring by the dozens. And one of us just stood on the apron, and I just looked out at the crowd, and two guys wrestled while their partners stood on the apron and looked out for anything more dangerous. And then they changed position, we got through with it, whatever the fuck. Then I yelled at people afterwards. But he just took off and left and wasn't going to come back, and sends people into a fucking riot, because now they've been kind of a bad show anyway. Plus, think of the kind of wrestling shows that Little Rock was used to. And it was a WWF house show back in those days. So anyway, so they all got pissed, they got fucked around, and here came the cops and the tear gas, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, it was a big major fucking deal, because Shawn Michaels made a bad situation worse, as he did in almost every situation he was in back in those days.
I have to ask you a question about all this, but I must say it is surprising more people did not throw tennis balls at you throughout your career when you really think about it.
Well, but when they did, they throw a tennis ball at a fucking guy with a tennis racket, because I'd drill it back at them, and then Elliot Murdoch or somebody come in, oh, you're going to get a suit, and then they'll get your fucking cops to disarm them.
That's the one thing in wrestling I never got to experience. Tennis balls back in the hands. That's the one thing I love.
It's a lot fucking harder than you can throw them, too. So,
the question about Shawn Michaels, you bring up that you're at Vince's house when he has this phone call. Jack call was the agent. And Shawn's on the call. He's one of the top guys, if not the top guy at that moment. I mean, who's to say? But also highly influential. And I'm wondering, an agent, Jack Lanson in this instance, how do they do their job? If they have to tell you what exactly happened, and you know you have this vindictive, troublemaking, addicted top star who is going to be either on the phone with you at the same time, or is going to be in your boss's ear the whole time, burying you or something. I mean, how hard is that? How hard was it? I know you can talk about your experiences, but for an agent, how hard was it for Shawn Michaels' era to do it?
well, it depended on who it was. I mean, he would still, in effect, he would disrespect Pat Patterson with just his behavior, some of the matches, or whether he was going to do them, or whether he's going to do the job in them, or take them seriously, or whatever. But he wouldn't just disrespect Pat to his face. And Jack Lanza, he was pretty decent around too. But as somebody like Jack would, with that kind of weathered tone in his voice, and I mean, everybody wasn't on the same fucking phone call. You know, it's okay, we're on a conference call. No, he wanted to get the true story, so he got them all privately. Every once in a while, it'd be a conference call, but Jack would say, well, and Sean felt that he wasn't safe, kind of thing like that, which told Vince what he needed to know. It just, they were just doing that shit because they could get away with it suddenly. And, which is what caused the whole thing with Brett, who did take the business more seriously as for the good of all the people in the business, and et cetera, et cetera. But, it was just, what are you going to end in? Tony Gurria, I don't know if he ever talked to fucking Sean. He was doing underneath matches. He was happy to stay away from the whole thing, I'm sure. Gerald Briscoe was never, from the time they did the curtain call thing, Gerald was probably about as hot as I was about it, and I think we topped the list. So he didn't like putting up with all that shit, but if Vince put up with it, then everybody else had to put up with it. And as I've mentioned before, when I asked Jerry Jarrett here on this program one time, what would you have done if with the curtain call, if your two biggest stars who you had made more money than they'd ever made in their lives and put your championship on them and made them your main event attractions, exposed the business in front of the fans in your main building, in your main city? He said it would have been just like the day after they assassinated Kennedy. We would have been sorry that they were gone, but life would go on. He would have fired their fucking asses on the spot regardless of how big of stars they were. Because at that point, especially at that point in time, with those guys in the main events, business couldn't have really got too much worse.
That's the thing. So many people are fascinated by the relationship between Vince and Shawn Michaels throughout the years. And part of it's because Vince gave him the power like he was a Antonino Rocco-like draw. And he wasn't. He wasn't. The ratings didn't go up. The house shows went down.
Well, look at the bully game. I mean, my old friend, my bosom buddy Kevin Nash. But let's face it, Kevin Nash never drew a fucking dime until he went to WCW. It was because they thought he was still working for the WWF. That's what got him over. Vince pushed him to the fucking moon, and he was over in that audience. But it wasn't like he was over suddenly coming to see him because he was over. The people that came to the WWF in that era, he was over with them, as that's why when he mentioned that he was the lowest paid WWF champion in history, Gerald Briscoe responded because he was the lowest drawing WWF champion in history. He became a megastar by going to WCW and convincing people he was still with the WWF.
Do you think Vince enjoyed the Clique torturing everyone? Legitimately.
Probably in the same part of his brain that likes the fart jokes and shit. I think he did, and I don't know why, but it was such silliness. It began the silliness of our business, and it started making everybody's job so much harder to make people to take the shit seriously enough to pay for it when everybody was acting like a fucking juvenile on camera in order to try to get over with a goddamn, audience with the attention span of a fucking gnat, like that watched the Jerry Springer show. Wonder where they got that from.
It was just legendary, and you got to check it out. The Jim Cornette, the Dairy Queen rant is priceless. And this is real life. This shit happened on a daily basis.
It's on YouTube right now. You can just go ahead and throw it in your Google machine. Jim Cornette, Dairy Queen incident. Jimmy Del Rey, Jim Cornette, Jericho, Lance Storm, J.R. Benson, and Ron Head.
Ron Head is the one who shot it, yeah.
They're all in the car together.
Jericho, what's his name's in there? I thought Hammy and Chris were in there too.
No, I didn't know if they were.
Okay.
Now, I think that what you're remembering on the story is Tammy and Chris were actually inside the restaurant.
Okay.
So, while these guys are going to the drive-thru, Tammy and Chris decided to just go in to get their food.
Got it.
So they're all there.
Yeah, it was legendary.
I mean, when Cornette opens the window and leans through and says, "We wouldn't have ordered the shit if we didn't want it, you stupid fucking ugly bitch."
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that.
I was like, this dude is my new fucking wrestling hero.
Yeah, well, okay.
I mean, I don't know that I can behave like that in real life, but goddamn, more power to somebody who can. That's fucking awesome. Oh, it was absolutely tremendous. You got to check it out. But it was a classic corny rant. So, chat us up here. You guys start to do a little bit of a talent exchange with Smoky Mountain. You are in the WWF at the time. How does that come about? Who reaches out to who? It feels a little bit unusual for Vince McMahon to do things like this at the time, but I guess because business is down, he's open to other ideas? Or how does the thinking change there, and how does this relationship start?
Well, Jim Ross was doing some commentary, helping Corny out, and it was in between JR's stints, too. So I was always a big fan of Cornette. We were friends, and I was always looking for ways to bring Cornette in. This goes even way back to in the 80s, trying to get Corny in. He just wasn't interested in coming to New York, and wasn't his cup of tea, if you will. But Corny was looking for some help, and JR had ideas, and hey, maybe this could be a place where we could cultivate some young talent, and Corny could coach some of these guys up. So it was some place that we felt we could help control. We could send them talent for some of their bigger shows, help them draw a house, and maybe we'll be able to cultivate some guys and bring them up.
Given Jericho, Storm, Kane, all the names we ran through earlier,
Alto.
even though a lot of those guys didn't come straight in, several did. That's a pretty cool concept that proved to be worthwhile. And we would see him do this later with Ohio Valley Wrestling, and I'm sure we're going to get there later, but it's one of, if you don't know what Jim Cornette did in Ohio Valley, he's one of the fucking unsung heroes of wrestling. We'll get there.
Sure. Well, but it came down to, I really want a Cornette.
You did.
I did. And Vince loved Cornette. He really wanted Cornette. But I also knew that to get Corny to cooperate with us,
you had to help him on his promotion.
You gotta give him something.
Yeah.
So,
and when you're saying something, you don't mean money. You mean he has a passion project.
Corny wasn't interested. I mean, Corny's always interested in money. That wouldn't be true, but it was more of
he wanted his deal to succeed.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so it was, all right, if we can promote Corny's Smoky Mountain and maybe use some of his talent on our show to be able to give Smoky Mountain a rub that way, maybe we can get Cornette up here. So at the time, Cornette was managing the Heavenly Bodies. Vince, it was always a weird, sticky situation in anything that had to do with my brother and suggesting him for a job or anything like that. So I let other people do that. I let Pat Patterson got a pitch. You got to see the Heavenly Bodies. They're great. They work and they do it. That made a case. So I pitched to Cornette. Hey, man, would you be interested in coming up and doing some Raws and maybe bringing the bodies? We plugged Smoky Mountain in the process. Well, yeah, that was freaking as hell. So I can get my tag team champions on your show, and I can plug my shit on a national basis. And you may send some of your talent down to Smoky Mountain. And by the way, we'll help pay that talent we send down there for you. You don't have to really worry about that. That was an interesting prospect for him. So we book the Heavenly Bodies and Jim Cornette to come to TV. What Corny didn't expect was once he got there, Vince had other ideas. And Vince saw Jim Cornette as the American spokesperson
For Yokozuna.
for Yokozuna.
So let's take a pause here for a minute. The debut happens in on July 25th, in fact, 1993, and they're at the Castle Rec Center in Alexandria Bay, New York. There's roughly 1,000 folks there. It would air on August 2nd. It got a 2.9 rating. And the way he's introduced is Vince McMahon is the babyface commentator at the time. Bobby Heenan is his sidekick on commentary. And they're doing a bit where Ted DiBiase is on the phone discussing his loss over the weekend on Wrestling Challenge to the 1-2-3 Kid, when all of a sudden, Jim Cornette is in the middle of a WWF ring. Smart marks at the time know that, you know, he's running Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but even casual fans recognize him because, hey, this is the guy from Mid-South and from Dallas and from Memphis and most recently WCW and Jim Crockett Promotions. So it's kind of a cool deal. Now, the way Corny remembers this all coming together is he taped some sort of promo with your brother shit-talking you and taking a few jabs. Does this ring a bell?
Yeah, he did something like that at some point, yeah.
So, he mentions that you guys were friendly. Yeah, you and
That was a promo that he did in Smoky Mountain or something. But I don't think it aired anywhere. It was just something he did.
He writes, Tom's father happened to be visiting from Texas
yeah.
and came to see the Smoky Mountain TV taping that Jimmy debuted at. We decided to play a little joke on Tom's brother, Bruce. Bruce, as many people know, has been working for the WWF in booking and TV production for several years and had a memorable stint as manager of Brother Love on TV in the early 90s. He talks about how he had known you from working in Houston in '84 and that you guys spoke every so often on TV. He continues, so at our TV, the Bodies and I did a promo with Tom's father talking about how the Pritchard family, with Tom and Jimmy, was becoming a wrestling dynasty. I asked Tom's father if there were any other members of the family involved in the sport, and he replied that there was one other Pritchard working for that fake wrestling company in New York, and a few other friendly jabs were thrown at Bruce. Of course, none of this was ever intended to air on TV, but I called Bruce and told him that his dad had done a great promo introducing Tom's new cousin, and that it was going to air on Smoky TV, and I had made a VHS tape of it so he could see it. Without, of course, telling him the specific verbiage. Bruce said he was excited and couldn't wait to see it. So about a week later, I got a call from Bruce, whose first words were, "Very funny, motherfucker." He also alluded to the fact that he had not been alone when he watched it. Although he didn't mention who else had been in the room, it was believed that it was Vince McMahon, Pat Patterson, or both. I was laughing, but actually swallowed a giggle in midstream when the next words out of his mouth were, "So do you guys want to make some shots up here?" I asked if he was serious, and he said yes. They were looking for new talent, and he could see the Bodies working with some of their teams, especially the Steiners, who had some bouts in WCW with the Midnight Express. So that's kind of how he says it all came around, and of course, eventually, he makes the debut. How do you remember the tape thing going down?
I remember getting the tape. I remember watching the tape, and it was hilarious, but we pretty much had an idea.
When you watched the tape, did you watch it with Vince and Pat in your office?
I may have shown it to him at some point, yeah.
And they all
probably did, yeah. Of course they did.
And they knew it was the real thing next to air.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Good day, Outlander.
So before we talk about the debut angle, where Cornette comes out on Raw for the very first time, let's talk about what if you wouldn't have. Because a lot of guys in wrestling, when they get an offer from one company, they try to play it against the other company, don't they?
Yeah, without a doubt, all the time, man.
So by this time, in 1993, Dusty's back with WCW. Now, I know Cornette didn't leave there on the best terms in '90, and considering how it all turned out, he probably made the smarter choice in going to the WWF. And a smarter choice for our listeners would be to switch to DollarShaveClub.com.
Oh, man, no doubt about it. You know, I love my Dollar Shave Club executive razors. Matter of fact, I've got it packed in my bag for when I leave here tomorrow. Take it with me everywhere I go.
All right. Hypothetically, if Dusty Rhodes was trying to talk Jim Cornette into coming over to WCW at the time, what would it sound like if Dusty Rhodes were trying to convince Jim Cornette to switch to DollarShaveClub.com today?
Jeanette green, baby. Jeanette, little baby. DollarShaveClub.com is a smarter choice. Now, you're going to get great shave and great pride, and the dream knows how frugal you are, baby. But best of all, I know you don't like to leave Capricornette. You got that house on the hill just like you like it. And now, with DollarShaveClub.com, you ain't got to get your fat ass off the couch no more. You go down to the store where they got all them razors. This razor, they all locked up behind the case. You gotta find somebody to open up the razor faucet.
Now, you know a good blade job when you see one, don't you, Dream?
Ooh, fucking like a bucket, baby. You know I do, Conrad. I like to keep my shaving simple, too. Now, you don't need no shaving gimmicks, no, baby. Don't put no polka dots on my razor. Give them to me with a weedy handle. About 40 cassette of some of that Dr. Carver shave butter. Ooh, it's so sweet. See, that's your first month supply. You get the entire first month supply for only $5. You hear me? $5 in free shipping, baby. You can't beat that.
So, Dream, what do you like best about DollarShaveClub.com?
Listen to this, my thing. Okay, don't tell nobody. It's Dr. Carver's shave butter. That Jimsy likes them smooth and hairy. You don't want no ingrown hair, the razor bumps, and Jimmy's USA. This stuff right here is licking and come on a go too.
For a limited time, new members get their first month of the Executive Razor with a tube of their Dr. Carver shave butter for only $5 with free shipping. After that, razors are just a few bucks a month. And you heard the dream. You'll get an awesome weighty handle, a full set of 4 razors, and a tube of their shave butter. After your first month, replacement cartridges ship automatically at their regular price.
There ain't no hidden fees or commitment, and you can cancel it anytime you like. You join our club today at DollarShaveClub.com/wrestle.
Check it out, DollarShaveClub.com/wrestle. You'll be glad you did. So Bobby Heenan is expected to see Jim Cornette. He jumps in the ring and proclaims that he is the greatest manager in the history of wrestling, which is a really, really big rub at the time. And everybody kind of agrees that Cornette and Bobby Heenan are 2 of, if not the greatest managers of all time. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly, and I think they would both play good.
Meltzer wrote of the angle, after watching the angle on Monday Night Raw, which was good, this is a good opportunity for himself. The timing couldn't be better since there are no top-flight players working the national scene. So Cornette will stand out now more than ever when people like Heenan, Hart, Dillon, and Dangerously were around. And it's curious now, because when you look at it, you don't really see the great staples of heel managers that we had in the past. But here, Cornette certainly stands out.
I think Cornette would have stood out with the best of the best. I think if you put Cornette in the stable with like Roxy Albano, the Brand Wizard, Harry Hart, Bobby Heenan, all those guys, Corny still would have stood out.
I wasn't diminishing Cornette's talent.
I know what you're saying.
I agree with you. It's just an anomaly that, hey, Vince wasn't doing it at this time, and he's not doing it now. Were you influential in having him have a change of heart, or why does he say, okay, we'll do it? Is it because he feels like Yoko can't communicate the way he needs him to, and he doesn't have confidence in Fuji?
Well, Fuji couldn't cut a promo to save his life, and Fuji wasn't a promo guy, and Yoko wasn't a promo guy. So he needed that heat-seeking talker on that side, because you had Yoko who could deliver in the ring and could get heat in the ring, but you needed somebody to talk him into the arena.
So, of course, they debut the Heavenly Bodies here, and they issue a challenge to Rick and Scott Steiner on behalf of this team, the Heavenly Bodies. Meltzer would write, there was a lot of talk, some of it not positive, among some in the group about the surprise during the past week. None of the wrestlers were informed about it beforehand, which probably should have been handled better, since he appeared to do 4 weeks worth of unnecessary worrying and speculation. They got out of hand and had guys trying to fend off rumors that went past ridiculous. Meltzer also writes, and this sounds probably very true about Cornette, but one thing that people have to realize is that between running the business, booking the television house show, and owning his own stuff, Cornette dates, a television taping on the 18th, one trip to Connecticut to cut face-to-face promos, and SummerSlam on August 30th. He goes on to say, and I thought you might appreciate this, Bruce, it's a nice ego boost that he got Vince McMahon to plug his product on WWF telecast. But that doesn't mean a hill of beans when it comes to help improving Smoky Mountain's business. Bringing WWF talent to Smoky Mountain under the right circumstances can help business, but it has to be done carefully and in a manner where the WWF talent isn't portrayed as being superior major league talent. Because that will all but make the SMW wrestlers seem minor league in their own territory, which will kill them, and certainly Cornette is smart enough to avoid that obvious pitfall. So, there's Meltzer's take. Kind of catch everybody up on what chaos would have been created by not smartening up the boys and him appearing on TV.
This kind of the wrestling industry has booked so many territories. It's so successful with all the wrestling territories and matches. All of his creative ideas that he's come up with on that. So with all that being said, there probably was paranoia, but at the same time, he's the surprise, he's the shock.
The paranoia
Came on the SMW side. The guys who were afraid that, oh my God, there's a famous leader that is now on the television and TV. So people are going home. But it was done to create that shock, and maybe they should have been, had some kind of a head should have been addressed. I don't know how quickly or how poorly it's been addressed, but yeah, there was some terrible. And then, of course, it's completely the opposite. Oh, Bruce, of course, Bruce is going to take care of the brothers, and everybody will be fine, or it'll be fine. What about this? So there was
later, we start to see the results. Quote, just 6 days after drawing its second biggest game in history, SMW shattered both the attendance and gay record with a gay showdown on August 20th in Knoxville, headlined by Bob Armstrong and Jim Cornette in a lumberjack match in which Armstrong vowed to refund all the fans' ticket money before he failed to send Cornette to the hospital. A crowd of 2,780 fans paid over $10,100. More than double the previous day in the company's history in Knoxville. So, well, it certainly meant more than a couple minutes.
there he goes again.
It says, I discovered the ulterior motive behind Bruce's call an hour after the bodies and I arrived at the arena for our first taping. Bruce told me that Vince and Pat talked to Bane when in catering. I assumed that Vince would want to air out all the negative things I had said over the years about his product, but shortly into the conversation, I realized he had no idea I had ever knocked him. I later learned that he never, to this day, watched or has watched any wrestling other than his own, so I didn't elaborate. Vince and Pat presented me with an offhand idea that we just had, I thought it was, that I could be WWF champion Yokozuna's American spokesman. So, how did you guys convince a guy who is, by his own admission, not a fan of flying, to take a WWF schedule? And obviously, you try to be limited in your pitch at first. We just went over the fact that he only had 3 dates booked in August. But it seems like, let's take the time out. A lot of people, I'm just assuming everybody knows this, a lot of people may not realize it, but Jim Cornette would rather drop to the other end of the world than fly anywhere. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Corny's not going to get on. Goddamn death to you, motherfucker!
And some of the distances that he would rather opt out of flying in order to drive, I mean, that would be pretty damn ridiculous at times, would it not?
Don't admit I had double audible!
What is double audible?
Audible's the best way to enjoy books, you redneck! I can run for hours and hours listening to my favorite Audible titles like Sex for a Cheeseburger!
when it's not a title with Audible, Sex for a Cheeseburger.
Yes, it is, you hillbilly! Go check Audible right now and look for Sex on a Cheeseburger!
Alright.
Look it up!
Well, I stand corrected. It is there. Sex for a Cheeseburger is available on Audible. How do you like it?
Double onions, extra mayo!
I meant Audible. How do you like Audible?
Already told you, love it! Unless when I'm in the car, unless when I'm walking my dog Harley, I love Harley. When I eat a cheeseburger, or fantasy book with Smoky Mountain for the 19th time. I'll tell you one thing, comrade, I'd rather listen to Audible than listen to this damn show, that's for sure.
Well, if you're not happy at any point with your selection over at Audible, you can exchange it for any other title at any time. No questions asked. They even call it the Great Listen Guarantee.
I guarantee you I'm never coming on this show ever again.
Seriously, Corny, what's your favorite Audible book?
Run to the Rat God by Barbara Hambly.
Well, to each his own. Do what Jim Cornette would do when you're on that same old commute. Let the traffic crawl while your pulse races. Can't make more time, but you can make the most of it. Turn your commute into something more with a free trial at Audible. Go to audible.com/Bruce to start now. That's audible.com/Bruce. So you guys talk him into managing Yokozuna. I guess since he's already there and he's excited and he's got the heavenly bodies excited, you guys kind of have the leverage at that point. He feels obligated to say yes, doesn't he?
No, he could have said no.
Sure, he could have.
Well, he could have. He's a goddamn man, anyway.
Well, of course, we know that he starts managing Yokozuna, and this happens on August 9th. It includes footage of the Lex Express at Comiskey Park, and this was featured for the official contract signing for Luger Yoko at SummerSlam. And then we see Cornette come out with Mr. Fuji and, of course, the champion. And he is here as advertised, Yokozuna's new American spokesperson. After Luger signed the contract, Cornette announced that a clause was added to the match that said there would be no rematch. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the Steiner brothers start working with the Heavenly Bodies. The Steiners would win those matches by disqualification when Cornette would interfere. Let's talk about SummerSlam 93. That's where we see the Steiner brothers defeat the Heavenly Bodies after about 9.5 minutes when both champions, Rick and Scott, pin Jimmy Del Rey following the Frankensteiner. But what stands out most to me is the interview with the Steiner brothers' mom. Do you remember what happened during this interview ringside?
Absolutely not.
So the Steiners' mom and sister are ringside during the segment, and I guess their sister refers to Rick as Rob.
What was that?
Well, when you talk to Linda, did she say, I hope Terry wins tonight? Probably. I'm just saying, it's fucking awesome.
Well, that's what you get when you go live and you talk to family.
No, I get it. It's just interesting to me that there's so much fucking scripting and control now, and back then it was so loose that fucking shoe names are making air.
Yeah, it should have.
So in the main event, as we all know, Lex Luger defeats the world champion Yokozuna, but he does it by countout after about 18 minutes or so. And this doesn't exactly go the way we wanted. Now, you can hear all about this in the Lex Express episode if you want what maybe should have happened, could have happened, might have happened, all about the Lex Express. It's available in the archives now. But before we get too much further into this, I feel like we're missing a golden opportunity here. Since Cornette was summoned in his very first meeting to meet with Vince, and Cornette has admitted that he was a little nervous about having to air out all the dirty laundry of things he had been critical about, what might that have sounded like if Vince was in the loop on the things that he had been saying before?
You said what, pal?
Yeah, that's just silly.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, no. Vince is running shit from everybody, so
when he knows that Cornette doesn't want to come in full time.
Oh, he knew that it would get worse.
Not bad, pal. You know you've got a company to run. You know you're concentrated on that Smoky River wrestling you got down there in where Virginia, right there, where the Smoky River goes through there. But we only need a little bit of your time. The TV, that's promo, television, pay-per-view appearances. Oh, we'll plug the smoke. What is it again? Yes, we'll plug your promotion.
He knew. He knew what buttons to push. He knew Corny hated to fly. He knew. We just went with that. He also knew Corny needed to promote his promotion. He knew what would get him to sign.
So let's talk about Survivor Series 1993. I've always been a little fascinated by this because we see Tom Pritchard and Jimmy Del Rey with Jim Cornette defeating the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson to win the titles after about 13 minutes. This happens when Pritchard pins Gibson after Del Rey came off the top rope with Cornette's tennis racket. This all happens, of course, behind the referee's back. But on commentary, Ross notes that the feud between Cornette and the Rock and Roll Express had been going 10 years, dating back to when Cornette managed the Midnight Express. Everything about this is fascinating to me because this happens at a time when you guys aren't acknowledging number 2 at all. And I realized that at the time, it's not like WCW was presenting the Midnight Express or the Rock and Roll Express. But this just doesn't seem like something Vince does at the time, to have another promotion's titles on here and to have what happened in another company 5 years prior discussed.
Well, it was something that we were plugging in the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express issue. And it was something that was going on at Smoky Mountain at the time. So to acknowledge the history, and we didn't say WCW, and went back to the original feud, which is really Mid-South, but that's what Jim was alluding to. But from time to time, Vince would acknowledge history, if you will, and go back and throw those kind of tidbits in there, especially with JR.
Oh yeah, hashtag it's Miller time. Let's talk about 1994. They start the year off, of course, with Cornette still being the American spokesman for Yokozuna. They're still involved in the feud with Lex Luger. But let's fast forward to WrestleMania 10. It's Madison Square Garden. It's March 20th, 1994. Sell out, 18,000 fans on hand. And Cornette makes his WrestleMania debut, and he's here in Yokozuna's corner. I know that Cornette had been involved in a lot of big cards, you know, whether it was Starcades or shows at the Superdome. But WrestleMania, even for someone who says he hated the product, had to be a pretty fucking cool little deal for anybody in the business. Do you remember having a conversation with Corny about his involvement in WrestleMania and that being his first one at WrestleMania 10?
Not in particular, but I think it's a big deal for anybody. And I'm sure that Corny felt that it was a big deal, milestone in his career to finally get there.
And then eventually, 1995, let's just go ahead and skip around, because through the rest of 94, you see Cornette working with Yokozuna. He's also making appearances with the Heavenly Body, but mostly focusing on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He's doing that full time. But as we cruise on in to 1995 in the WWF, now we see Owen and Yokozuna teaming together with Jim Cornette in their corner. And at WrestleMania 11, they would actually win the tag titles from the Smoking Guns. Do you remember any fun ribs that Owen Hart would have had at the expense of Yokozuna or Jim Cornette? Because this feels like there was lots of comedy in this trio.
I really don't remember anything specific, but I'm sure that, especially because Corny was easy to rib. Corny was someone that, especially like when Jake was there and taking the snake and shoving it up Corny's behind, and you never saw Corny move or be as agile as he was when those type of things took place. So I'm sure Owen had a lot of fun at Cornette's expense.
In 1995, Bill Watts comes to the WWF, and I found this always to be a really interesting development, especially when you consider the philosophies of Watts and Vince McMahon. Meltzer wrote in The Observer, Vince announced at a meeting of all WWF wrestlers prior to the In Your House pay-per-view show on September 24th in Saginaw, Michigan, that Bill Watts would be taking a larger share of responsibility for the creative end of wrestling. Both McMahon and Watts spoke at the meeting, with McMahon describing the new situation as he would be spending more time in his role as a corporate executive, and that Watts would take over many of his duties when it came to the creative aspects of the television, arena, and pay-per-view shows. McMahon said that he would still work for Watts on these aspects, but that he wouldn't overrule Watts. In addition to being in charge of finishes on television, arena, and pay-per-view shows, Watts will attend more arena events and has already started to evaluate wrestlers' performances and talking to them about it after matches. Although Watts gained a horrible reputation after his tenure in WCW a few years ago, up to this point there has been no discontent among WWF wrestlers, at least to any major degree, about Watts since he's arrived. I found that interesting because Cornette was a Watts guy because he respected Watts' philosophy of believable and credible wrestling. He really wanted to focus on the toughness and athleticism and just the idea that wrestling should be presented as a serious presentation. And it had a major impact, probably, in how Cornette thought about the business for the rest of his career and even now. But when he comes in here, is this something that Jim is looking forward to? Or is he so focused on Smoky Mountain he kind of doesn't give a shit?
I think that Jim was so focused on Smoky Mountain at that time still that he was probably happy that Watts was there because it was an ally for him and someone that he could personally relate to. But at the same time, I don't think that he was looking at it as hooray for me because he wasn't looking at WWF as a priority for Jim Cornette.
Yeah. We'll talk about Bill Watts and the WWF in more detail, I'm sure, in the future. Smoky Mountain would close up shop in 1995. He would write, he being Jim Cornette, TV markets weren't going to make it in the wrestling recession of the mid-90s. Even the WWF lost $6 million in 1995. I hate to do this, but I had to close it up in December. So Cornette would close the doors in late November 95, early December, and sell off all of the Smoky Mountain rights and videos to the WWF. And later, he would say that he probably chose the wrong time to start a wrestling fed because the business as a whole was in a recession. And there's been a lot of talk through the history of wrestling that the business is cyclical, and it was obviously in a down when he opened it. Meltzer wrote, the announcement was made to the wrestlers during the intermission at the house show on November 26th in Cookeville, Tennessee by President Jim Cornette. Cornette told the wrestlers that barring a miracle, it would be the group's final show. At the end of the show, in a symbolic gesture after the main event, all the faces and heels joined in, including the Heavenly Bodies, in attacking Cornette and leaving him for dead in the middle of the ring as he was carried back to the dressing room. On the December 18th, 95 edition of The Observer, Meltzer wrote, Jim Cornette had a meeting with Vince McMahon where he was offered a smoking book, but no word on if he's accepted. So, do I have it right here that Cornette wouldn't have moved from Tennessee to Connecticut to take this booking job until Smoky Mountain was completely closed up? So probably late 95, early 96 when he moves?
Yeah, there was absolutely, that wasn't an option for him until he just reached the end and knew that Smoky Mountain would not be able to continue. So he made the deal to come in.
So he makes the deal to come in, and when he comes in to do creative. I'd love to hear what it sounded like the first time Vince McMahon and Jim Cornette are in a creative meeting together.
Wow. That day, and I forget who all was there. I know there was me, Vince, and maybe Cornette. I don't know if JR was sitting in with us that day, or I want to say there was somebody else there. But it was eventually, guys get comfortable with Cornette had a completely different philosophy. The idea of it was to advance the command. So, take their time, spend more time in the office with Cornette and I to kind of the television writing, let Jim Ross take over the day-to-day booking and warehouse show. Vince McMahon to kind of just sit back and supervise from afar. So the idea was off the title Patterson.
So Cornette, as we mentioned, obviously finds himself moving to Connecticut. I've got to hear some fun stories, and if you don't have anything, then just let me know what it might sound like for Cornette to recap what it was like to live in Connecticut, or the first time he went looking for houses in Connecticut. Give me fucking something.
The fucking Yankee motherfuckers!
Corny hated the Northeast, hated Connecticut, and at first he was living downtown Stamford at these high-rise apartments. So you take a country boy from Louisville, Kentucky, and stick him in a high-rise in the middle of Stamford, Connecticut, and he was positively miserable. So he hated the people. He couldn't understand them. They couldn't understand him. What the fuck can't you understand, you goddamn Yankee motherfucker? I'll kill you. It was just a constant battle of us versus them with Jimmy, and he tried hard to fit in, but it was a losing battle on so many fronts. The hatred of, now imagine you're living in the Northeast, and for those of you who've never been in the Northeast, I would say that the Northeast has some of the greatest Italian food outside of Italy, any other place in the world. And Jim had his mom send him Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinners by the case. And when I say by the case, man, I'm talking like the big 24 case of Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinner. Goddamn, it's a full spaghetti dinner. You take the goddamn tomato sauce, you get a pound of goddamn hamburger, you mix the hamburger up, you put the tomato sauce in there, you boil the fucking spaghetti. It's a perfect goddamn meal. But all around him are some of the greatest Italian restaurants anywhere in the world.
Sure.
But he thought they sucked, and the Chef Boyardee box spaghetti from Kentucky was better because he couldn't find that in Connecticut because they actually had fresh pasta and real homemade sauce, and he wanted his Chef Boyardee box spaghetti.
I hear you, but let me just go ahead and give a shout out for Chef Boyardee's ravioli and pizza when I was a kid. That stuff was the real MVP.
Oh, you goddamn hillbilly motherfucker.
I was a poor white boy from Alabama.
Nothing wrong with that.
Don't be hating.
I ain't hating.
I didn't have all this fanciness that you did as a kid.
I didn't have it till I went up there.
So that makes you better than me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right.
So you talked a minute ago about trying to get Cornette kind of off to your own like it was with you and Pat. But there for a while, creative was pretty much just you and Cornette. From win to win, what were the good ideas? What were the bad ideas? What are your favorite memories of doing that?
Well, I'll tell you the funny thing. There were so many just little incidents that happened when we were riding by ourselves. We weren't riding by ourselves. We were actually riding with Vince from time to time. And I remember one day we were at Vince's house, and Cornette hated going to Vince's house too because of the traffic on the Merritt Parkway. Absolutely drove him insane. But every morning it was just a chore. I bought a house in Monroe, Connecticut. The idea in my head was that we would go to my house and work out of my house in Monroe. So I told Corny, get a house, get someplace up in Monroe, which is 45 minutes on a good day to get to the office. But I didn't want to be close to the office because when you're close to the office, you get called into the office a lot. And I liked working out of my house. So Cornette gets a place right not too far from where I was. And we were working at my house. We had a little deal, but I think one of the funniest things was when we would get stuck, we started out the first time and we wrote a pay-per-view. I forget which pay-per-view it was, but at the end of each match, you would write down on the run sheet at the end of the match, okay, boom, so-and-so goes over, music on out. So whenever we would get stuck, we would just look at each other and kind of go, okay, music on out. That was our next transition. That's how punchy you kind of get in writing things. But anyway, we get together with Vince one day, and this is before Corny had made the move, and there's no Cornette. So I called Jim. Jim was in Sanford, living in the high-rise at this point. I said, hey, man, where are you? You going to make it in? Oh, goddamn. George died. Oh, my God, Corny. What do you mean George died? So to give you a little backstory, George was a rat. Do you remember the Mankind vignettes?
Yes.
Do you remember the rat that Mankind had in the original vignettes in the little cell, the Mankind original vignettes with the rat crawling around, crawling all over him?
Are you about to tell me that was Jim Cornette's rat?
That was Jim Cornette's rat, George.
Oh, wait. Is that the first rat Jim Cornette ever had?
That was the first rat that Jim Cornette ever had that had huge balls.
And 4 legs.
Okay.
All right.
So, Jimmy had a pet rat. His name was George.
Who in the business didn't have a pet rat?
There you go. And one of the things that was particularly peculiar about this rat was his large testicles. But I'm calling Cornette on this one day, and George had passed. George had left us. I said, well, oh, man, I'm sorry about that. Well, goddamn, it's terrible. He was sick, and we took him to the vet, and the vet was just beside himself, and they had to do surgery. I said, wait a minute, stop. Corny, you mean to tell me that you took a fucking rat to a vet in Stamford, Connecticut, and they said the rat was sick, but that they could do surgery and make him better? Well, fuck yeah, what would you do if it was one of your loved ones? Sorry. It was so sad. He described how the rat was laying there and George was there. They had like a little apparatus. And they breathed for him during the procedure.
You're fucking making this up.
I swear to God on my children's head. And the nurse sat there and she put little breaths in George's mouth so he could breathe and continue to breathe through the operation, through the surgery. But he didn't make it. He died. $1,100 for a rat in surgery.
I thought the purpose of the rats was they were surgery.
Okay. And so Corny missed about 6 weeks worth of work, mourning the rat and laying in bed and holding the box. So being the asshole that I am, I know that's hard to believe. I'm like, all right, man. So, what now? So what'd you do? Do they just throw the rat away, or you guys flush it? What? Fuck you, dead it! I'll kill you, motherfucker! So, Corny, what do you do with a dead rat? Right now, we've got him in the freezer. So, George died. They got the body.
The body.
They put it in a Ziploc, put it in a fucking shoebox, and put him in the freezer. So that he
next to the ice cream.
Next to the ice cream and next to the frozen pizza and everything else. So that he can have a proper burial in the Carolinas or Kentucky or wherever the fuck George came from. So he could be buried with the rest of his rat family. I'm not really. This is a true story. Corny, tell the story on your thing if you want to, but, he was distraught and missed work over the rat dying. Very distraught. Because Cornette's a sensitive son of a bitch, man.
Oh, yeah.